Hey guys, my name is Trevor Sullivan and welcome to this video where I wanted to take just a couple of minutes to show you a really cool tool if you are working with Ubuntu Linux. Now, the Ubuntu Linux operating system is freely distributed by Canonical, the company Canonical, and they have developed this open source tool called Multipass, and that's what we're looking at right here. So you can head out to multipass.run in your web browser, and essentially you can download this tool for Linux, Windows, as well as Mac OS. And once you've installed Multipass on your dev system, it's very easy to just spin up a brand new Ubuntu Linux virtual machine from the command line. So if you check out the command line right over here, I've got this Multipass command installed on my system. I'm on Windows 10, but you could use whatever operating system you'd like to that's supported by Multipass. And if you do a Multipass ls, this is just going to show me the virtual machines that have been configured on my dev system. As you can see, I've got one named Animating Seahorse here that's in the deleted state. I've actually deleted that one, and I could just go ahead and purge it by doing a Multipass purge here. However, what you'll notice is that I still have one VM that is in the running state. Because I'm on Windows 10, Multipass is actually using the Hyper-V hypervisor, which is built into the Windows 10 operating system. And what you're going to notice here is that there's several different IPv4 interfaces that are associated with this particular virtual machine, and that's because I've actually installed Multipass itself inside of that virtual machine. So I'm basically doing nested virtualization, so there's a separate network interface for that. Plus, I've also installed the Docker engine on there as well. And so if I wanted to SSH into this virtual machine to get a shell on it, I don't necessarily know which of these IP addresses I want to use. So what I can do is do a multipass. So if you do multipass by itself here, you'll see that there's this shell subcommand. So you can do multipass shell. And because I didn't specify the name of the virtual machine, of course, it's going to spin up one named primary by default. But if I copy the virtual machine name over here, you can see I just instantaneously get a shell on that remote virtual machine. Or it's actually a local virtual machine. And basically, what we want to do is to get SSH access to the virtual machine instead of having to use this shell command in order to get shell access to the VM. And the reason that we want to do this is because when you use SSH access directly, you can use things like automation tools. You can, SCP files back and forth between the virtual machine. You can do things like use Ansible, for example, or you could use PowerShell or Python scripts that do SSH connections to these virtual machines. So the question kind of becomes, well, how exactly do I get direct access to the SSH service on those remote virtual machines? Well, as it turns out, there is actually a GitHub thread right over here that talks about where to find the SSH keys for Multipass. So when you install Multipass, it generates a public-private key pair. It associates that with the Ubuntu user on those virtual machines, and you can use that private key, of course, to get direct SSH access to it. However, you also have to figure out which interface, which IPv4 address you actually want to connect to, because not all of them are pingable from my host operating system here. So essentially, if you kind of scroll through this thread, you'll basically see a bunch of people talking about different platforms like Linux, Mac OS, and Windows to understand where exactly on the file system the Multipass tool is putting those keys. And so it turns out that someone named Oleg here actually posted and said that on the Windows platform, the private key that Multipass generates is actually under the System32 directory. So it's basically under your Windows directory, System32 config. It's actually putting it under the system profile. So Multipass is actually, I believe, running as the system user in the Windows operating system. And then under the system profiles app data directory, under roaming, under Multipass D, there's an SSH keys directory that contains the IDRSA file, which is the private key itself. So now that you understand kind of where that private key is on the file system, you can now construct your SSH command in order to gain access to the virtual machine. However, you still got to figure out which interface you want to talk to. So essentially what I did is I actually created a PowerShell wrapper for this. So no longer do you have to kind of hunt things down and figure out which IP address you want to connect to or anything like that, or hunt and peck for the private key. So essentially what I've done is created this PowerShell module called Multipass, And if you go out to the PowerShell gallery, this is where you can just kind of search for different modules that you want to install on your system. And so if you check out this Multipass module here, I've gone through a couple of versions because I accidentally hard-coded some values, and it's just a very bare bones module at this point. But essentially, it exports one really important command, which is connect-multipass VM. So kind of along with the verb-noun terminology in PowerShell, we're doing a connect to a multipass VM, and then it actually has support for auto-completion or tab completion for the multipass virtual machine names on your dev system. And what's really cool is that I'm basically wrapping the Multipass CLI, so we can do Multipass LS, and if we do Multipass LS, again, that's going to show us the VMs that are running on our dev system here. However, if you do --help on it, you actually have the option on the Multipass CLI to spit out information in a different format. So I didn't want to have to write a whole bunch of parsing code to parse the IP addresses and the virtual machine names and all that from this output here in this kind of tabular format. So instead, what I ended up doing is taking a look at multipass ls --format JSON, and once I put it into a machine-readable format, I can now turn these into PowerShell objects. I can iterate over each of these IPv4 addresses and actually ping them, as well as test for access to TCP port 22 to determine if SSH is actually accessible on that particular IP address. So I can kind of discover the correct network interface to talk to over SSH and then inject that IP address into an SSH command that references the private key file in your system directory. So this currently only works on Windows 10. I have some plumbing there to kind of work on Mac OS and Linux as well, assuming that I know where the private key is. It's not quite there yet, though. I don't have a Mac OS system to test it on. But basically, I wanted to show you kind of how to use this. And so what you can do is run install. Well, let's do find module first. So we'll do find module -name mult star, and that's going to search for anything starting with mult. And as you can see, the multipass module is right here. So I'm going to do install module, multipass, and we're going to do scope current user -force. And that's just going to install this module to my user directory. So it's going to go under documents, my documents directory /PowerShell/modules. And then once that is installed, we can start to use this helper function that makes it really easy to establish an SSH connection directly to a virtual machine. And so now that this is installed, I need to make sure that I am running as administrator. I'm not currently, so I'm actually going to fire up a brand new window right here. So you want to make sure that you're running as administrator, and that's because the private key file is only accessible to the administrator, right? Because it's under that system profile directory, you need to make sure that you are running as administrator with PowerShell so that you can get access to that private key file. So what I'm going to do is just do a get command -module, and then I'll do multipass, and you can tab complete the module name, of course, that's just built into PowerShell itself. And as you can see, it just exports a single function, connect multipass VM. So I'm going to do const_m, let's do const_mult, and hit tab to complete that. And then I'll just tab complete the parameter name, which is just a VM name. And then I'll go ahead and just tab complete. I'll hit tab, and you can see I am cycling through all of the virtual machine names that were returned from the multipass ls command. So I'm basically just taking the JSON here, grabbing the name of the virtual machines, and returning that as IntelliSense in PowerShell to make it very easy to use. So we'll do this again, connect to multipass VM. We'll just tab complete all this, hit enter, and in just a moment here, I've got an SSH session to my virtual machine that is running under the Multipass tool on Hyper-V on Windows 10. So in any case, feel free to check out this helper module called Multipass. If you are regularly doing interactive SSH sessions into your virtual machines, it just makes it really easy to get access to that shell rather than having to, hunt and peck for the correct IP address and, construct your SSH command with the correct private key and all of that stuff. So it just kind of simplifies the process. Anyways, I am Trevor Sullivan. Again, feel free to visit me online at trevorsullivan.net. That's my personal website. Also, you can find a whole bunch of my training over at CBT Nuggets, as I am a CBT Nuggets full-time trainer. So if you head out to CBT Nuggets and you just search for Trevor, You can filter by trainer right here, and if you check off Trevor here, you'll see I've got 137, actually 108 different skills which I have created around a whole bunch of different topics, anything from Kubernetes to PowerShell automation to a lot of different AWS content. In fact, most of the content I believe I've produced at CBT Nuggets is very AWS centric. We talk about things like serverless. We talk about things like automating the Docker engine with Python. We've got Amazon time stream training if you're looking for a time series database as a managed service. There's a ton of different training here, so you can just kind of scroll through this and see everything that is available on CBT Nuggets. Additionally, if you just go to Google and search for CBT Nuggets free, you can actually sign up for a free account here at CBT Nuggets if you just kind of want to get familiar with our content, get familiar with the different trainers at CBT Nuggets. You can check out our free training right here. We've got kind of introductory level training. We've got things like DevOps training where I've got some free PowerShell and Docker training and things like that. Also under, I believe it's sysadmin here, I've also got some more PowerShell training on how to send Windows notification toasts with PowerShell. So things like that, definitely check out the free training that we have here. As long as you have a Google account, you can just sign up for free and you'll be good to go. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something new. Take care.